Hello, everyone. This is the third class for the course of Social Psychological Perspectives on Health. And this is Nobuhiko Goto. So, in the previous lecture, we talked about social identity and how social identity affects our thoughts and feelings and behavior. In today's lecture, we will further learn about what social identity is, and we also talk about what self-categorization theory is. So, let's start. Social identity theory. This is the psychology of intergroup relations. So, I will talk when the social identity theory was originally proposed. This theory was created in order to explain the intergroup relations and intergroup behaviors. So the theory postulates that individuals try to understand the meaning and standing of the group through comparison with relative groups. So they try to understand what their group is, what their group looks like compared to other groups. Do we look better than other groups, or do we worse than other groups? And also, individuals are motivated to define their own group favorably by differentiating it positively from those outgroups. And the second point is based on the assumption that people are motivated to enhance positive identity. So people are usually motivated to see themselves positively. They want to think that they are good, and then they are even better than others. And through the extension of this assumption, it is also assumed that individuals are motivated to define their group favorably as well. Okay. One note here is that the theory, this social identity theory, does not argue that individuals are motivated to see out groups negatively for the sake of seeing one's group positively. And then I guess this is a hard assumption or hard, in a sense, hypothesis that you may feel difficult to think example, So when you think, let's say we are all Japanese, and you might want to think how you can find good aspects of Japanese. And then you may want to compare Japanese with other people, like other people in the other countries. And then, or maybe you even want to think how we tend to think about people in other countries. And then how we actually, or how others actually talk about other nations and Japan. And then you might find many examples that people usually talk bad about other countries while they seldomly talk about good things about Japan. And then I guess this is still empirical question whether it is true that people do actually focus on positive aspects of in-group rather than focus on negative aspects of out-groups. But I guess this sentence is trying to say that when people compare one's in-group and out-groups, they tend to focus on what their group look better. And then they try to find some groups that make our groups looks better. So I guess the starting point is not from what negative point other groups have, but instead, people usually start from thinking about what positive aspects their in-group have, and then they tend to try to find groups that do worse than their own group. So I guess although what you actually observe tends to be that people negatively talk about out groups, but the starting point actually is that people first think about good aspects of their group, and then they try to find other groups that may look us, that make us look better. Okay, maybe you want to try to think about some examples that how people talk about out groups, and then when you find those cases, then you may try to think about how they what they talk is relative to their own group. Okay, so if you define yourself as a Hitotsubashi student, then you may compare Hitotsubashi students with other university students and focus on aspects that Hitotsubashi students look better. And then although you may talk about the negative aspects of other university students, but it is a case when your own group is not so bad on that aspect. And then if you feel that maybe other university students have some negative aspects, but if you feel that Hitotsubashi students also have such negative aspects, then you may not talk about that issue at all. You may pick up those issues only if you feel that we Hitotsubashi students are not equal to those students, or the issue is not relevant, or the issue does not apply to Hitotsubashi students, then that negative issue. Okay, maybe, yeah, I think it's a good idea to think some example by yourself and then see how this may be true. Okay, next. So I said that social identity theory postulates that people try to see their group positively, and through this, they try to gain positive identity. And then what this calls, and what the textbook argues, is that by gaining a positive identity, or gaining a positive identity actually leads to better well-being. So by belonging to a positive group and a motivated process to see one's group positive, people gain positive identity. And this is why belonging to a group actually leads to better well-being. This is through the process of seeing one's group positive. And then people was innately motivated to see one's group positive. By belonging to a positive group, people gain positive identity, and then people can develop better well-being. As I said that already, positive identity leads to high collective self-esteem that derived from one's social identity. So collective self-esteem refers to the self-esteem or feeling good about yourself that comes from one's group. So for example, when Japan team wins the medal in an Olympic game, although you do not contribute to winning that game at all, you still feel good about yourself just because you share the Japanese identity with that player. This kind of feeling good sentiment is called collective self-esteem. And then also high collective self-esteem leads to more life satisfaction, less psychological distress, and this will in turn enhance well-being. Okay. And the capacity for social identity to function as a beneficial psychological resources can be enhanced or reduced by the state and circumstances of group associated with the identity. So as I just said that when Japanese team or Japanese player wins a Olympic game, you feel great about yourself. But when a Japanese player loses the game, then you would feel poor about yourself. So this analysis can be formed as the following hypothesis. Hypothesis 3, the group circumstance hypothesis. When and to the extent that a person defines themselves in terms of a given social identity, their well-being will be affected by the state and circumstances of the group with which they identify. I mean, with which that identity is associated. So the state and the circumstances refer to whether a Japanese player wins an international match or not. So when the Japanese player wins a match, it is a positive state. And when he or she loses the match, there is a negative state. And then just the state does not determine whether you feel good about yourself or not. But in addition to such state or circumstance, the extent that you define yourself as a member of that group or as a member of the group that the player belongs to, you would thus feeling that you experience from such state and circumstance would be enhanced or reduced. Okay, so I guess here there are two things, positive or negative state, and the extent to which you define yourself as a member of a group. And when there is a positive thing and then you strongly identify with the group, you will strongly feel good about yourself. But even when there is a positive circumstance, if you do not strongly identify with your group, then the feeling you will experience will be also weak. Okay? Maybe somewhat positive, but not very strong. So there is an example in the textbook. So maybe you want to look up the study done by Branscombe and Wang, and also Wang and Branscombe. And also there is another example in the textbook, which was conducted by, I'm not sure how to pronounce this name, but Ethier and then Duix. And then I will come back to this study in chapter 3 for more details, but basically what they found was that well-being of Hispanic students fell once they entered universities. And this is because Hispanic students are devalued in universities in the United States. This is because they usually do poor on academics. I mean, so basically they do not get good grades in the class, or maybe the rate of dropping out is high, I guess. And then because of such devalued identity among the devalued identity in the United States, in American universities, Hispanic students would feel lower well-being. They found that their identity is not so positive. Their identity is not seen so positive. And that would lead to lower well-being. But interestingly, highly identified individuals, highly identified Hispanic students, Hispanic students who highly identified with his or her Hispanic identity engage more in cultural, Hispanic cultural activities, and then restore positive identity. So although their identity may be devalued by other Caucasian, European, white Americans in universities, through engaging more in cultural activities, they would find how good their cultural heritage is, or how good their Hispanic culture is, then they restore positive identity. And then as a consequence of restoring positive identity, they would gain better well-being again. So there is a process for identity restoration. So people usually try to see their group as a positive, but when it's not very easy, people may choose whether they restore their identity or leave their group. So when the positivity of their group identity is compromised, people are motivated to restore it. And this statement can be formed as the following hypothesis. Hypothesis 4, the identity restoration hypothesis. People will be motivated to restore positive identity when this is compromised by events that threaten or undermine their social identities, such as group failure, stigma, low status, or loss of group membership. So group failure can, an example of group failure can be something like losing an Olympic game, losing a match in the Olympic game. And then stigma can, an example of stigma is something like, Hispanic students in American universities. So they tend to be looked lower, or low status is also the example of that. I mean, an example of low status can be also that of Hispanic students in American universities. And the loss of group membership, this means that their group is no longer, their group no longer does exist, or they have to leave their group. And so two sets of factors that determine whether they will restore their identity or whether they would leave their group. The first one is perceived perceived permeability of group boundaries. So whether personal mobility is possible and whether social identification is passive permeability of group boundaries means whether personal mobility is possible or not. So it means that, is it really easy or difficult to leave the group? And then also it's related to whether it is easy or difficult to re-enter the group or re-enter the group. And this permeability is negatively related to social identification. And then also the status of group feeds into social identification. So these 3 points are illustrated in this figure. So when people see that their group has a high status, they are more likely, so let me get the pen here. So, or maybe I could use Spotlight. Oh, not this one. Sorry. Here. Okay, so when people see that their group has a high status, it will lead to high social identification. When people see that not only they, but others look their group positively, then they feel very good about their group. And then this feeling good about their group actually leads to higher social identification. And when people strongly identify with their group, they feel so difficult to leave their group. This is related to permeability. So, but when people feel that when people do not strongly identify with their group, then they feel that it's so easy for them to just ditch their group, So when people see high permeability, people are more likely to leave their group. And then people, when the permeability is low, people are less likely to leave the group. I guess you could think about some sport fan, like when their favorite team is losing, then they feel that the status of the group, the fan group is low, because those who are cheering the losing team, that status is maybe looked low. And then because the status is seen low, they will weakly identify with their team, sports team. And then this will lead to high permeability. Okay, the team is losing, and then I do not feel much committed any longer to our team. And then I guess maybe it's so easy, or maybe it's time to stop going to the stadium. Then they will leave their group. They will leave the fandom. Okay, so this can be further formalized as the following hypothesis. Hypothesis 5, the mobility hypothesis. When circumstances threaten, undermine, or preclude positive social identity, if people perceive group boundaries to be permeable, they are likely to respond to the threat to positive identity through strategies of personal mobility. So I guess we can also think about the example of Hispanic students that I mentioned before. So when people feel that being in university actually threaten their positive identity of being Hispanic, and then they feel that, well, maybe there's no much reason to stay in the university, then I will just drop out from the university. So I guess this is a kind of social consequences of Hispanic students being seen negatively. And then this is something that definitely needs to be changed. Okay, so then I said that there are two sets of factors that determine whether they restore their identity or not. And then the first one was permeability, and the second one is whether the position of the in-group is insecure. In other words, whether the position of the in-group is stable and legitimate. And when the position of the in-group is seen stable and legitimate, people use social creativity. So in the form of hypothesis, the creativity hypothesis, when circumstances threaten, undermine, or preclude positive social identity. And if people perceive group boundaries to be impermeable, but group relations to be secure, they are likely to respond to the threat to positive identity through strategies of social creativity. Social creativity here means that people try to be creative in terms of seeing their group. So they try to see positive aspects of their group, or try to present positive aspects of their group that others have not yet noticed. But when the position of the group in group is not secure or unstable and illegitimate, then people use the strategy of social comparison and to produce social change. So I guess you can think about Black Lives Matter demonstration as an example. So the hypothesis 7, the competition hypothesis. When circumstances threaten, undermine, or preclude positive social identity, and if people perceive group boundaries to be impermeable and group relations to be insecure, they are likely to respond to the threats to positive identity through strategies of social competition. So because the position of Black people was seen unstable and illegitimate, I guess it was especially seen illegitimate. People went on demonstration, and then they try to restore their positive identity of Black people. So, as I said, that there are two sets of factors. When the group boundary is permeable, they are likely to use the personal mobility strategy. So basically, they will leave a group. But when the permeability is low, the step they would take next would be two. There are two steps or two directions. The first one is social creativity, because they cannot leave a group and then maybe their position is legitimate and stable. They try to present positive aspects of their in-group so that they can restore their positive identity. And when the group position is not stable or legitimate, they use the strategy of social competition. So basically, they confront with other people so that they can restore their positive identity. Okay, I guess I just stop here and then I will keep talking about chapter 2 in the next video.